Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 223 of Retro Power Uncut, and you join me by a Reliant Scimitar. Something's changed, something's moved. Yeah, we have the Scimitar back in here. You may remember in the background, there is a Reliant Scimitar project in the wings here, and we've obviously touched on it in previous episodes, and it had kind of faded into the background a bit in that things had been going on, but not very obviously in the workshop. Well, that's changed again now. You'll recall from the past that you'll have seen in previous episodes, you'll have seen the design renderings for the car, and then a lot of CAD work that George had been doing on trying to finalise the shape of the car. And the conclusion from that was, other than widening it a bit and a few tweaks, actually an awful lot of the original body lines of the car were very nice, and we didn't really want to lose them too much. So that was the sort of background on that. And then you will recall that we had settled on an engine, which as a tribute to the Reliant Scimitar was going to be loosely Essex V6 based, but with a major twist in that it is a Cosworth GAA engine built by Rickwood Motorsport, which we now have. We're using a ZF, we're coupling that to a ZF 5-speed transmission. I can't remember the model number, it's an 18.5 something. It's basically the same transmission, but all new, as would be fitted to a Lotus Sunbeam back in the day. So we're going to be coupling that to that transmission. And that is going to be fitted to a modified, and when I say modified, it's a new build chassis, but a new build elongated TVR chassis, very similar to a late Chimera or Sagaris type TVR chassis. There's not a lot of differences in that none of the outriggers are being used, and the chassis was built by Sportmotive in Stoke-on-Trent and uses their billet uprights all round. It's basically one of their Jamie's going to have to put the name on the screen because I've forgotten what they called it now. Evolution package, I think, but I can't remember exactly what they call their upgraded chassis package. But that's what it is from Sportmotive, but lengthened to suit the Scimitar wheelbase. Now, a lot of the bodywork is going to be derived from the CAD. However, we have a concern over committing to machining an entire one-piece mould for an entire car body purely from CAD without any scale model or anything, any visual references. It was one thing doing a panel at a time, as we did with the Allegros, and we were very happy with those, but to do a full one-piece body, the financial commitment to the tooling is pretty significant. And with no visual way of checking that in advance, we were pretty concerned. So what we've actually decided to do is model the changes from the CAD onto a Scimitar body. And to that end, we needed a Scimitar body on which to model those, and we happen to have one because the project did begin with a donor car, and here it is. Possibly one of the poorliest cars we've ever stripped down. I would say it's possibly the second poorliest car we've ever stripped down, second to a Datsun 260Z that we stripped many years ago that we scrapped, and it was so fragile it was actually difficult to load into the scrap. With this one, it would have been like that had the body not been fiberglass, but I don't think there were probably only a small handful of fasteners that actually came out without being cut off on this. Nearly every fastener had corroded away to some extent, and anything that was made of steel was pretty much now made of rust. So it was a fairly messy strip down, but that didn't really cause us too much of an issue because we're not really using any of those parts. We just wanted the actual body shell as a basis to start modelling from for taking a mould from. And as you can see now, the guys have stripped that down and removed all the parts. I'll hand over to Mark actually for a moment of enlightenment on the joys of the strip down process. So over to Mark for a minute.
All right, we're live on set. Just had a big ordeal getting this bathtub off the chassis. We had to lift it up as you've seen in the montage. Right up, nose up, because the back of the chassis rail goes right up into the back of the shell. Ball ache, but we didn't want to end up cracking the roof off, making it a cabriolet, because we've got to scan all this. But yeah, what an ordeal that was. Filthy, decades of spiders, dust, rust. bags of like, it looks like illegal substances. Car's ram-packed to these little goodies. Probably asbestos. And breathe that in. Yeah, there's been loads of them. None of these cars, well, the shell wouldn't have rotted out, but the chassis would have, which it has. So yeah. Now, we've got to get this out on the forklift. If anyone would like this, let us know. You can come, bang it on your trailer, and get it out of here. It'll probably blow away on the way home, but you've got the old Capri engine. Anyway, I better crack on.
So thank you, Mark. And yeah, as you can see, it's now basically stripped down. There's a few bits of interior to come out. I think we're going to jet wash it before doing too much more on it. There's a few more little odds and sods to remove from it, but the vast bulk of it is now stripped down. And then last night, just before going home, I couldn't resist just wheeling the TVR, the modified TVR Sport Motive chassis underneath it. I can't actually put the two together at the moment because there's various bits of fiberglass have got to be trimmed out of the way, and prior to trimming those out of the way I need to make the sills, which have sort of exploded and disintegrated, I need to make them a bit more structurally sound before we cut anything out the middle. But what we will be doing is then removing fiberglass that's in the way and basically getting this so that it will sit at the correct ride height over the chassis. And then we can do some basic brackets to hold it in place while we then start developing the final shape and doing the working out of how everything's going to go, and working out what parts of this body shell we can use for taking moulds off and what parts we can't, what areas we can use, what areas we can revise, and the ways we can go about basically getting all the mould sections that we need to do the final carbon fibre version of the wide Scimitar body that is going to be sitting on this new chassis. So yeah, do up your seatbelt. This is going to be a bumpy ride, but it's going to be a pretty exciting ride at that. And the final elements of a tubular backbone, semi-space frame, semi-backbone chassised 450-ish horsepower Cosworth GAA powered carbon fibre Reliant Scimitar are going to be a journey worth waiting for. We're pretty excited about it. Moving on from that one, I think at that point, we'll spin very briefly past the Aston. Not a lot has really occurred to this. Martin, our multitasking man, did a very little bit more planishing on the roof of this earlier this week, but I very quickly had to take him off that work onto other stuff. So we'll park that there for this week. The other work that's been going on this, and there is a lot in the background, I will let the guys next door talk about, because that's where the main progress has been on that this week. So we'll leave that for the minute. And then we move on to the wasabi. So I'm going to spin around here, have a gulp of coffee, and come around here and gesticulate at what Bobby's been working on, which is, no surprises, the door aperture and the door pillar. Bobby has now got, and I think we were just about at that point last week, finalised the final position of the door hinges, which, as again recapping a little bit, they have been modified by moving them outboard, by moving that one upwards, and by altering the radius on which they operate. All of which is quite a large undertaking with a very organically shaped door. Yes, if it was a barn door, fairly easy, but with a fairly organically shaped door, which has got a slightly oddball ceiling system on it to start with, that's no mean feat. That is no small undertaking. I'm not going to try and explain all of it now. It's very hard to explain, and to be quite honest, there's still bits of it I still can't even get my head around. Bobby's battled his way through it and was pretty much at breaking point, I think, a couple of days ago, but he's got through all of that now, which is good, because as I said, he was in that position where most of the time when you hit a problem in your line of work, you can usually find somebody to lean on a little bit and get a bit of an idea from them, and two minds being greater than one and all that sort of thing going on. Bobby was kind of in the realms of the wilderness when you have got to the point where you're already outside the ability of anybody else to help you an awful lot, and you're actually in the bit where you're kind of doing it yourself. And I always feel, I've been in that position a few times, and it kind of feels like you're in the wilderness a bit, and like it's all on you. And Bobby had got to that stage, but he's broken through that stage now, has all that functional, has everything working, and is now into the sheet metal stage. So he's now creating the door pillars for the car, which, as you can see, are quite a complicated shape in that he needs to finalise this shape here, which is necessary for the function of the door seal. He needs to finalise that to enable the door seal to continue down this corner and follow on round, and that door seal is then going to seal along the sill here, along here, and then follow up and then carry on along that corner there. And so that needs to be a complete sealing surface. So it all needs to be smooth and it all needs to transition neatly, and that's what he's doing here at the moment, basically making this pillar from 18 gauge 1.2mm thick steel, getting all of that shape put into it, and then that will be joined to become one piece with this piece that's already bolted to the hinge brackets, so everything's known to be in the right place, and then from there he'll continue to fabricate the rest of the pillar, which will also include some significant boxes inside here which will brace up the door hinge mountings, and then all of that will then be braced in by sheet metal, which will then go to this flange down here where the original Audi A pillar finished. So it's going to be quite a tapered in pillar down there. These are just some temporary brackets which we're holding on the 3D printed outer body surface templates. But yeah, I think Bobby's now on the, it's certainly not at all easy, but it's easier than the battle he was having with the hinge geometry. He's now on to battling the sheet metal into shape to do the A-pillars, and he's doing a very nice job of it. In fact, there's another section he's making in there. I'm going to turn my phone off, so I don't want that ringing. Yeah, he's going to be battling various bits of sheet metal to create the A-pillars on both sides of the car. So that's coming on really well, good progress, and yeah, a fearsome fight put up with what is one of the hardest challenges we've faced, I have to say, in the fabrication shop in many years, if at all. So yeah, top work there. Moving on from that, we're going to go in the direction of I don't know if I'm going to be able to be got into shot here. Yes, I think I am. We'll be okay. I think we can go there. Matt's done a runner. He's run over there. He's standing behind camera now, hiding. But Matt is in the depths of much lead, as you can see. He is doing the leading on the side of the E-Type, and on an E-Type there is normally a lot of lead. Anybody who's worked on one of these, there is a large amount of lead work on the side of an E-Type, particularly on this A-post area. The blend between the front of the door, the A-post, and the A-post and the bonnet is generally a high lead area. And there's a panel join line along here where both sides from the factory are basically, there's an inwards joggle, and then they're generally just sort of smashed out of the way in the factory and then built up with lead. And that's how this car was. That's basically how it's gone back to. And then there's also the joint between the sill and the A-post there, which is a seam, which is leaded, and the same there between the quarter panel and the sill, which is also leaded. So there's various leaded areas there. Then there's also lead work down the back of the door. Matt's got the door gap correct. He's welded wire down the back of the new door skin, got the door gap correct, or very, very close to correct, and then just finally titivated that with lead down there. We've also done some lead work here where we got a little bit of a pull into the wheel arch around there. He's got some lead work up there to get that exactly right, to get the roll of the panel there correct around the wheel arch. He's also leaded in the sail panel at the top. It's really coming together very nicely now. He's going to file this lead in, but leave it rough just down the very front edge, because we can't finalise all of that until we've got the carbon fibre bonnet, and that's a little way away, because obviously, as you'll have seen from the CAD chats from the previous weeks, there's tooling to be made before we can finalise the outer skin, and the outer skin be made in carbon. All of that's got to be done and all bonded together before that line is final, and that can't be cut in until that line's final. But that's really good progress. The other side was also mentioned. Matt had started doing the door reskins last week, and we had an issue with the doors going a little bit hollow in the middle. He's resolved that. We've put some pads inside the doors, as was the loose plan, and that's worked quite well. We've put some non-porous plastic pads in there to substitute the original sort of fiberglass pads that the doors had between the side intrusion bars and the outer skins, and they've been polyurethane sealed in place so they can't move, and they're helping to support the skin and just keep that in the correct line down the side. So really happy with all that. That's coming together nicely. Matt's doing a cracking job with the lead work, and this car is going to have very, very, very tidy door shut lines and be very, very clean and very crisp. So that's what we want, and it's coming on nicely. Moving on from that, I'm going to reverse over here a little bit actually, because I walked past it earlier. Martin, as I said, our multitasking handyman, has been turning his hand to more tasks again. So as you recall, last week he was welding a roof into an Aston Martin DBS, which is not necessarily the job your handyman would typically be doing, but that's kind of Martin's bread and butter of his previous role. And then this week, amongst many other jobs, bear in mind a lot of his time spent dashing around in a car, going to various suppliers, picking things up, dropping things off and that sort of stuff. His other little job has been knocking this bit of fabrication up for us, which is, you remember some time ago, Bobby had a bit of a plan to create an air conditioning hardline end forming tool. And I've touched on it before, and I mentioned that the tooling had just been done by Jonathan Plumridge at PBE CNC. Well, we have all of that tooling. I thought I'd kind of show you the general gist of the machine now. I think we might have showed it on the bench before, but it's now more or less installed in its final place. This spool valve block here is going to be mounted onto the side of this pillar so that it's handy. That's a little electro-hydraulic pump, which I think would probably be off a wheelchair lift or something similar. It actually came from a clearance sale when I bought that some time ago. That'll be mounted on the bottom there. We'll have some little tubs to put the tooling in down there. There'll be an oil drip tray under here so that when we lubricate the tooling, it doesn't all this stuff doesn't go everywhere. But basically, the key bit about this is what it actually achieves. So I thought I'd just pick up a little prop out of Bobby's magic box of stuff. That is the end form that we're looking for our lines. Now there are 3 different sizes. There's a 5/8 line, a 1/2 inch line and a 3/8 line. And then there's a nut which holds that together and screws on. Now that's a standard automotive air conditioning line type fitting. And there's another piece done on a shorter piece. But it's putting that swage on. We couldn't find anybody in the UK aftermarket who could supply us with those swaged ends swaged onto our preformed hard lines. We could find people who could supply those ends and weld them on, and we could find people who would weld ends like these onto pre-made hard lines, but we didn't really want to put a welded joint in. We wanted to make it as an OEM would and make the hard line in one piece and swage the ends onto it. That's the beauty of using the aluminium lines, is you can just put these fittings straight onto the ends. So what we've actually done is source the nuts and the O-rings, and then Bobby has drawn up the tooling. Jonathan Plumridge has machined the tooling and machined these various parts so that we have some D2 tool steel jaws and D2 tool steel punch and socket sets that go into this hydraulic former here, and we have a little hydraulic power pack. And then the ram will come forward. Your tool, the piece of tube you're end forming is inserted into the jaws in there, but obviously it can be as long as you like, sitting out across the workshop. As long as you can get the end in, you need a small straight section. You need a straight section around 60 millimeters long on the end. So you kind of have a bend in the last few millimeters of the tube. But basically with that straight section, it's not unlike a brake pipe flaring setup really. Put that in, clamp the jaws together using that screw, fit the punch to the hydraulic ram, and then power the ram forward, and it puts that swage on. It's a 2-step process. The first stage tapers the end of the tube down and starts reducing its diameter so that it can go into the second punch, and the second punch puts the swage onto it and also sizes the bore correctly. It has a support that goes into the bore to size that and stop it collapsing. So yeah, Bobby developed the idea for the tooling, tried it, basically just handmade some very basic tooling just to try it. It worked, so he drew it all up in CAD in his spare time, I hasten to add, and then we had that tooling made by Jonathan. and we were going to get it hardened. We've not actually had it hardened, and so far it's not actually picking up any marks without being hardened, so I think we're probably just going to leave it as is, because the amount we're going to use it, it's probably never going to wear out. It's not something we're going to be using every 5 minutes, but as I say, the problem is we can't find anybody to do this job, and we want to do it, so we made the kit and done it. So there we are, we're there pretty much with that now. I say Martin's just got a couple of bits more titivating to do on that, bolt the pump down, tidy up the lines, mount the spool valve block, put some bits for tooling on there, and we're pretty much ready. And the first job for this will be making the AC lines for the 2 Allegro projects. So that's its first production outing, so to speak. So that's all good. Moving on from that, we come on to Project Portofino, the XJ Coupe, which we are pretty much at the stage of stripping down now for final work. Stu has been busy on this, and I have done a little bit on it as well this week. Lots and lots of diverse little jobs. I'll give you some examples. Stu has drilled some holes in the top of a chassis rail, ready to receive some riv nuts for screwing on the line clamps, the Stauff clamps that we will use for holding the air conditioning hard lines, funnily enough, which will be swaged on that machine, which go from the bulkhead to the condenser. I think I mentioned it last week, we had a condenser from Fenair, which they sent us for a Series 3 XJC, which actually didn't fit as ideally as we wanted. It probably would fit a Series 3 XJC in standard form absolutely fine. However, ours isn't in standard form, and we're running the AC lines on the offside, the driver's side of the car, and that condenser actually was conducive to putting the lines on the near side of the car. We then discovered that Fenair also had some stock of some early XJS, pre-facelift type XJS condensers, and those looked very much like a Series 2 XJ Coupe condenser, which has the components the correct way around for what we want. So we used those ones. We got one of those, which we now have in the car here. Stu's put the little mounting holes in and got that hung on the front, and that puts everything where we want it. The bottom's not supported yet because the brackets that carry the bottom of it are also going to be the brackets that carry the charge cooler water radiator, which is actually a Porsche 911 double pass oil cooler, and that will be going across the bottom of there, and we haven't got that yet, so that's why that's sat in free space there, but there's nothing rocket science to occur there really. And Stu, another example of something Stu's been working on is filing some holes into the bulkhead here, welding up original holes and then cutting new holes to accept, and he's actually taken the plug with him so I can't show you, but to accept some Deutsch multi-pin rectangular bulkhead connectors, which we use on both sides to run the wiring looms forward, not the engine loom, but all the chassis loom forward of the bulkhead runs through 2 Deutsch connectors either side of the bulkhead, and we're putting the apertures in for those because they'll seal into the bulkhead. There's a water seal for those, and they need an accurately shaped hole to be cut. So Stu's got a little filing template that he clamps on and then needle files out inside to get those cut out correctly. It'd be nice at some point, I think if we're going to use those regularly, actually we might make a hydraulic punch for those, draw it up, and we'll get one cut in tool steel and hardened so we can put it in our hydraulic slug buster punch, then we can just drill a hole, put the punch in and chop the hole for the plugs through the bulkhead that way. I think that would be a wise way of going about that job in the future. So another job on the to-do list. Further to that, Stu's been stripping the dash out, getting the HVAC out because we've finalised the duct work. I will let Luke enlighten you on his final involvement with that, but there was a couple more bits of ducting we needed to do. So between Stu and Luke, they've got the plan together for those. Luke's drawn them up, and I'll let him show you what he's done there. And then, yeah, basically Stu's now removing various bits of the dash, which we're kind of done with now. There's a couple of areas we've still got bits to finalise, but we can't finalise them yet for various reasons. So that's going to come out, and we'll have to revisit that later. And then in the back of the car, we've finalised a couple of bits on the fuel system. Stu's done the fuel return line from the surge tank to the main tank. We were trying to work out which way to route that because there's exhausts in the way on these, and he's got a plan of where to route it, and he's now put the holes in, made the lines up and got it all neatly routed through, so that's spot on. That's all worked out well. It's actually simplified things a little bit at the back. We've de-panelled the car, as you can see. The panels are in the body shop, and in a minute, I think I'll probably hand over to Mark. But yeah, I think that's covered the bulk of what's been going on this. I'm sure I'll have missed a few things. Basically, the next steps on this are going to be to pull the engine, pull all the final bits. To do that, we're going to put this over on the 2-post lift. So really, the next job's going to be having a big shuffle round in here, get this over onto the 2-post lift, and strip it down, which we'll probably be dealing with tomorrow, I think. And then doing any final welding. There's a few little jobs that are marked up on it still to do. So getting through all those final jobs with a view to hopefully by the end of next week, being able to get it blasted and zinc metal sprayed and into the body shop. On that note of the body shop, I'm going to hand over to Mark and let him give you a little tour of the many little jobs that have been going on in there this week.
All right, welcome back to this week. We're busy as usual. So this week, I think Nat's bloody had a rant about the Scimitar, hasn't he? But you see me coming in, I've got a bit where we're taking the shell off. Jamie will flash that bit in a minute. Carnage. These guys are demasking some trolleys. Look technical here. Steve's just pulling this paper off. Well technical. Nah. So they're getting these ready because we've got the XJC panels in. It's been in metal fab for a while, so it's got sticky little handprints all over it. People touching it with their bare hands. Makes the right mess. So what we've had to do, we've had to clean them off. We've soaked it overnight with this little product here. It's like a wash-on stuff, treats all the rust, takes all the little handprints off when we use green scotch. It's supposed to be harmless, but I doubt it. But yeah, it's water-based product, so we've left that overnight. Then we're coming this morning. We're DAing them all off now back to a nice clean bare metal. Probably going to get some epoxy primer on them this afternoon if we can be asked. No, we definitely will. We definitely will. So it's busy on with these while we're waiting for the other car. I think we've got a little bit more to do. Just got to do some tinkering, metal work, do a little bit of seam welding. We should have that in probably about a couple of weeks. So that's it. We've just been busy. Most of the footage is going to be the Scimitar because we've been on that, getting covered in. I don't know, how old's the car? 40 years of like...
Spiders.
Yeah, spiders, asbestos, fiberglass. It wasn't very pleasant, that. Also, while we're here, I've mentioned this on my channel, but we're not allowed to talk about that. But we've got a good old follower on here, Phil. Phil Tucker's always commenting. Sent us these bad boys. I've mentioned him on our channel, but like I say, I'm just going to give him a little, because he's always commenting on this channel as well. He's one of the lovers, not the haters. So yeah, thank you, Phil. And on that note, we're finished there, and I'll see you next week.
So, thank you very much, Mark. And on that note, I think it's time to hand over to assembly shop. Let Cal take you through there and the CAD den and see what's been going on through there. So, till next time.
Oh, thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to start, I think, another episode. I might have done the last one standing between these two. No, I think it was over there last time. But anyway, standing between two awesome projects that are progressing very nicely at the minute. So some really cool visual transformations going on with the Allegro projects at the minute. The side skirts, which have been off for an age now, so nobody's really seen them with everything in place, are finally going on. So we saw the satin black going on those last week. These ones have been fitted up. They'd already done the spaces where they mate up against the underside of the quarter and the front wing. Just wanted to get that up and just measure for the spaces that are going to sit between the sill and the inner flange, shall we say, of the skirt, because they basically bolt into the sills that way and then up into the bottom of the quarter and the wing vertically. So that's been done. George is just printing all of those spaces at the minute. They can then come off, and then we've just got a small rubber fillet which basically sits along the panel gap, if you like, there. Stop dirt and road detritus coming up through the gap and mucking up the side of the car. So yeah, they'll be going on for the final time very shortly. And then the guys have also now trial fitted the skirts on the orange car as well. I think they've measured up for the spaces on those, so they're going to be in the process of doing those, and we'll be able to repeat the process on that. But yeah, it's just super cool seeing those skirts in place now, because they kind of really complete the look of the splitter and continue the sort of, or front spoiler should I say, and can complete the look down the side. And then on the subject of things coming together visually, they've now fitted the E30 BMW mouldings, which I think several episodes ago we showed them being modified at the back. So they were just a really nice solution to get a black moulding at the bottom of the door window with a seal. Clips worked really nicely on the thickness of the carbon fibre, and then they hold the inner seal against the glass as well. So that's looking really good. And then I think James is just going through the misery of trying to mitre all the joints for the rear window seals. So we found a really nice rubber profile for those rear windows, which kind of carries on the same black line onto the rear quarter. So yeah, he's just assembling those at the minute, which is a fairly time-consuming process. And then we will actually be able to start glazing up the rest of the car. So the door windows are already in, they're just wound down on this one. We'll be able to get those rear quarter windows in. The rear windows are in now. And yes, quite a lot of the interior will almost be in a position to go in. I think, I might have said last week that we might see the inner door handle armrest pieces that are being machined at the moment. I think it's probably going to be next week. He was just buttoning up the last of the machining on those. This is Jonathan at PBE CNC. He's just buttoning up the last bits of machining on those at the moment. So hopefully we'll see those next week, because that's like a pivotal thing then, because that's the last piece of accent anodising. So we've been gathering together all the bits for this gunmetal anodising we're doing, which is the accent colour on the inside. So things like the speaker grills, there's a big central part in the dash, those armrests, a few other parts as well, the ashtrays for instance, and then all those bits can go for anodising together. And then when we get them back, that's actually this sort of stumbling block in being able to assemble quite a lot of it. So for instance, the parcel shelf and the door cards, and then that will all be able to go together. The dash wiring harness is now in this one for the final time, which means we can fit the HVAC unit now, knowing that that's never going to come out again. So that is good. So yeah, just generally chipping away at progress on these. I think the guys have also been just 3D modelling and printing the fuel rail mounts to suit the size of injector we've got on these onto the Gen V throttle bodies. There needed to be a specific length of injector to clear the strut brace. So there isn't a standard off-the-shelf Gen V bracket for the fuel rail for those particular length injectors. So we're just machining some of those, which we did on the Escorts as well. And that actually leads me very nicely into Escorts and the fact that they're in final kind of phases before first fire up on Project Kuma. So throttle bodies went on, I think, earlier this week for the last time with all the revised linkage that we've done for those, for the fly-by-wire. Wiring harness has gone on that. They've been filling fluids, which is always exciting. Anthony's been going through spanner check stuff on that. So yeah, it's that kind of final pre-flight checks. We've still got the instrument cluster to go back in on it. You will have already seen the guys polishing up the boot lid and bonnet, which are due to go on, but there's no point in putting the bonnet on when we're working in the engine bay a lot anyway. So yeah, last stages essentially on that before we turn the key, which is equally nerve-wracking and exciting. Now while I'm talking about things that are off camera, the Interceptor that's behind Jamie at the minute, we've been doing some first little inroads into mechanical work for that. So Anthony's been stripping and rebuilding the wiper motor assembly, putting a new gear in that. The steering column, I think Nat will have already mentioned the fact that they had a bent column inner for it, and then they sourced another one which was quite badly corroded, so he had to machine that down, build it up with braze and make it good. So Anthony's been building up the steering column with that repaired inner, so the steering column will be ready to go in. I feel like there was something else, window regulators as well. So we're kind of going through the components that are going to be reused on that car and just refurbishing them ready for fitment. So yeah, that's kind of exciting, because it's probably going to be a few weeks before we get really thoroughly into the rebuild on that, but it's nice just to be getting some ducks in a row with it. And then Churchill, and it's been a really kind of exciting week for me on the interior on this, because we've got the first trim panel gone in, which is the first kind of hint of seeing the final interior, and I'm so happy with how it's going to come together on this. So Richard Has now leathered all of that rear, near side rear panel at the minute. I think we'd sort of shown over previous episodes the stages involved with that. So it was a CNC cut die bond back section. All of this stuff was CAD modelled, and then it's a series of carbon reinforced nylon 3D prints that make the three-dimensional sections, shall we say, so the speaker surround, and then a sort of bezel around the upper part of the card, which at the moment is an aluminium panel. That aluminium panel is going to be hydro dipped with a wood grain finish on it. But what you can see there is a very, very good hint of the final look. So there's a billet speaker grill to go in there still, which will have a copper finish on it, and then a wood grain where the aluminium is at the top. But that all fits extremely well. Very happy, incredibly happy with the job Rich has done on the upholstery work on it. It's just, well, I would go pretty close to saying it's flawless. And then this side, we've got the same one to do, but now we're happy with that fit on that one. This one was just a case of repeating, and I think he's already done the patterns for that. And then Luke has finished printing all of the rear parts of the centre console. We had a bit of to and fro on this because we were struggling with a few print defects, which we couldn't get to the bottom of. But we finally got all those done now. He's just about to plasma cut the bracket that holds that rear console section to the body shell itself, so we can get all those sections together and get that centre console piece in there. And then with this trim panel done on this side, it means Rich can start the creation of the rear seat, which is going to be a complete scratch creation. But yeah, it'll be very exciting to see him start to develop through that. So that is good. And then on the subject of exciting progress on this, the engine is getting extremely close to being ready to fit. So Adam was waiting for the shims, the valve clearance shims, to come back from machining or grinding as they are. They're now in, so the head's gone on, timing chain's on, sprockets are on. It's just about to fit the tensioner and get the tension set up on that. And that's pretty much the last thing then. Cam cover can go on, it's just got to put the cam sensor back in that, then that can come out of the engine room, can be mated up with the transmission, which has been sitting over there for quite a while after it was rebuilt, torque converters over there as well, so get that lot together, and then I think we'll be in a position to get it in. And Anthony's just been tying up the last jobs he wanted to get done before we went for engine fit, so he's got the air conditioning pipes now routed through there. There's just a couple of final clips to do once we've got the engine in and we know the exact position of everything there. But yes, essentially all of the engine bay ancillaries and plumbing jobs that we needed to do before the engine went in are now done. On Luke's 3D print list is the final version of these prototype pipes that sit on the inner wing here. There's another section underneath and they kind of bolt together, sandwiching the inner wing between. This is the air feed to the HVAC system, the other one's the engine air feed, and they connect through to these intakes down here, which will have machine grills on them. So we've just got to do the final print of those in carbon nylon, and they'll be able to go in, and that will coincide with, I think, the engine going in. So that is going to be a pretty big milestone on this project. What I will probably do now is just hand over to Luke and George, because I know they've had a lot on in their CAD layer this week. So here's those guys.
Okay, hello, welcome back to the CAD vestibule. So this week we've been doing, as always, a smattering of different things. I've been carrying on with, amongst other things, the Aston Martin chassis. So last week I said I've modelled the steering rack, so now I've got the mounts for that fitted. We've done a couple of different iterations of those. So now we've made it so we can have a bit of adjustability in terms of moving the rack forward and back. Because I think I've done the maths right to get the Ackerman right, but we want to be able to have adjustability if I haven't. Then I've been moving on to engine mounts and kind of mounting the engine. So I mentioned in previous weeks that we've managed to get CAD directly from GM. So this is an LS, no, not an LS, an LT1 engine from GM. And using that, we're going to figure out effectively how to mount it. Since we've CAD'd all the other chassis, it makes sense to do all the engine mounts in CAD as well. So what I've been on with is physically figuring that out. So, which brings me on to this, which is an engine mount from an Audi S4, and we're using this because effectively that car runs a V8 and has a similar amount of vibrations going through it, and it's quite a modern mount, and it also has a little added benefit of it's a multi-dampening engine mount, which I didn't even know was a thing. But yeah, so we're going to use that on the Aston to get kind of the dampening that we want, because we were kind of concerned of like transmitting all those vibrations into the chassis if we go too firm, which is where some kind of some rest of mod companies go wrong potentially. But yeah, so that's what I've been on with in this side of things. And then also on the flip side, I've been on with, Steve actually, sorry, I've been on with mounting the skirts on the second Allegro, which are looking really good and kind of really tie that whole look together. So we're, yeah, pretty happy with how that's looking, and I'm sure Jamie's got some nice footage of that. Yeah, and some other little bits and bobs which I won't go into. And yeah, I will now pass over to Luke. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I have been, I think, just after I filmed last week's segment, I moved on to something back on with the E-Type. So at the rear of the E-Type, tucked behind the number plate, which is going to flip up in a very cool fashion, either when you go into reverse or possibly on a button as well, in case you just need to flip it up to access what's behind there. There's going to be a little plate which houses not only a reverse camera, obviously hence why the plate flips up in reverse, but also a emergency boot pull, because everything being on electric isn't particularly great. Obviously if the battery dies, now what do? You're stuck out your car. So we've got an emergency boot pull, and then inside the boot there's going to be an emergency door release as well, and then a small little Alpine reverse camera, and then a trickle charging point as well. Cal found this really cool trickle charger, works on a magnetic connection, really nice unit. I really like the way that feels. So I designed that on Friday, printed it over the weekend, got it off the printer Monday morning, test fit all the components inside of it, everything fit great. So handed that over to Matt, kind of spoke to him about where it needs to sit on the car and how it's going to be mounted in. So I think soonish he'll be getting on with that, and then we can get that made out of billet. After that, it was hopping back onto the XJC. So a few weeks ago, you guys saw some renders for the interior for that. I think I mentioned this last week. The client was in, he saw the mirrors and everything. I made the changes to the mirrors. He's really happy with that now. So next time he's in, we can print both sides, get the angles right and everything, and then get those made out of billet as well. Some of the other things we talked about when he was down was the changes to the interior. Again, really good client, good with feedback. As a designer, client feedback is obviously everything. And the easiest clients to work with are the ones that know what they want and can give you really clear and concise feedback. And you kind of start from a point where you think you both are, and then narrow it down to a point where you both know that you are. So we've sent him two options now. One was a very original looking one, and one was kind of a mashup of the first one that you saw and then that really original one. So just waiting to hear back on that. Then after that interior, I hopped onto DBS interior and did a new iteration of that, which we'll show you the renders for that. I really, really like that one. The client has seen it. He is happy with it. He's got a few things that he wants to model as well, a couple of different tweaks that he wants to see visualized. So literally behind the definition of vestibule on my screen is the DBS interior, and I'm literally going to hop straight back on that now, make those edits, and then maybe in next week's video you'll see those edits. But I'm still want you guys to see the one that I did for him this week, because again, selfishly I really like it. And then it's, as I say in every other week, it's a bunch of really small bits. Both me and George, along with like the bigger projects such as interiors, chassis, outer body design, we also have to pick up on all the little jobs that need doing. Like finalising the HVAC ducts for the XJC. As with any building process, it's sometimes a bit of an iterative process. As more comes together on the car, especially on a classic car, trying to fit everything into a really tight space becomes harder and harder. And sometimes a vent adapter, which I've designed right at the beginning of when the car come in, no longer works when it's about to go into paint because there's stuff in the way. So just before the XJC goes into paint, I was down there with Nat and Stu, and we were just having a once over of the HVAC ducting, made a couple of tweaks to where some of them route, just because it's a lot easier to do something in CAD and get the shape you need in CAD rather than Stu trying to metal work in a shape, which will take forever and will do the job, but isn't the most efficient way of doing it. So literally prototyping right now, we've got what's hopefully the final iteration for all of the HVAC ducting on that. Allegro fuel clips as well. Gen V only offers a certain length of fuel rail clips, so we need to make additions to that. And then yeah, just loads of really small bits, which isn't really worth going into. But I think that's about it. So shall I hand back to Cal?
Thank you very much, guys. One thing I neglected to mention actually was on the Allegro, we were doing the trial fit of the vents in the lower valance. So they're a 3D printed part that we've designed, and they have a back shell which basically ducts all of the air that goes in those vents into the central section and through the radiator. So we're basically forcing as much air as we possibly can on this through the radiator just to maximise the cooling. But those vents look and fit absolutely spot on. So yeah, that was another job ticked off for this week. We're just waiting for some studs to arrive to do the final fit on that, and also on the other one as well. So yeah, on that note, I'm going to go down to the den, because I did say last week there's some interesting developments down there. So let's go and see what's going on down there. Okie dokie. Welcome back to the den. We're going to sidle past this stunning Fiat Dino. So since the last episode down here, we have now done the inspection on this. We know that we're doing a sort of light resto mod project with this, so we tailored our standard inspection a little bit to focus more on a baseline condition of the shell to make sure it was actually worth doing and we weren't going to find some horrors, and also focus a bit more on the things that we know we're using that might need rebuild, things like the engine and transmission, and less on the things that we know we're going to replace anyway. But yeah, the gist is it's a really good solid base, so we're looking forward to getting stuck into this. It's going to be fuel injection conversion, better brakes, better suspension, full interior retrim, nice audio system, complete rewire based around a PDM and a modern ECU. Basically just make it a nice, usable, drivable, enjoyable car. So we're looking forward to seeing that start to be ripped apart. And space, we have an expanding amount of space because various vehicles have left us. So the Jag XJR that was here all the way from Madrid 2 days ago was collected and is either back in Madrid or certainly on its way back to Madrid now. So that's created a bit of space. And then Project Utah was in here, which was picked up yesterday to make the journey back to London where Project Utah lives. Prior to that, the car went over to Dales to be detailed. So the car gets used in all conditions. I wanted to do an underbody kind of refresh on it, clean it all up underneath, top up the ceramic coating on it, and just give it a really good detailing session and make it look absolutely brand new again. So Nick drove it over there for that and drove it back. So I had the opportunity to do a nice little road test in it.
So you join me here in Project Utah, quite a well-known retro power car. This has been with us at the den for a gearbox rebuild, and we've just taken it to our detailer who wanted to do this at his place. So it's had a quick, well, I say a quick, it's had a good single stage machine polish and reapplication of the ceramics, and we've done under chassis clean. It's got a steam clean hand wash and some Dynax wax underneath as well. Keep it all fresh. But really I want to talk about this car objectively, because this is an utterly wonderful thing. And for me personally, it was one of the first things that got me onto the Retro Power YouTube channel and these videos that I am now on. The level of detail and the engineering in this car is utterly incredible. The seamless integration of the Toyota engine, yet it looks somehow so period still, is just utterly awe-inspiring, to be perfectly honest with you. So to be here now, having worked on the car, being able to drive it is a bit of a dream, if I'm really honest with you. The way this thing drives, I was kind of expecting, it's you know, still a classic car or whatever, it's going to feel a bit like a classic car, but it doesn't. It feels so much newer, and I think really the only thing that really makes it feel its age is just the wind noise from the windows and the mirrors and so on, where you've got so much detail on the outside, and it's just always going to create a bit of wind noise. It's quiet, it's refined, it's effortless. The gearbox is utterly just so sweet now. The way the thing pulls, I mean, it's not got mega amount of power, but it's got so much torque. You don't need to rev the thing out, you don't need to drive it hard. The engine sounds incredible, and it just pulls and it pulls and it pulls. And I honestly feel I could just drive to the south of France in it just now, just go straight to Dover, get on a boat and just tootle on down to France. It is that good and that comfortable. I've got a footrest for my left foot even, which is unheard of in a classic car. The controls are light. I've got Apple CarPlay, so I've got everything I can possibly need. I've got air conditioning, I've got heated seats. What more do you want? There is nothing more.
Let's go to France.
Yeah, should we just fucking go?
Awesome stuff. So yeah, that's gone back to London now, which has cleared up another space. And then I think this afternoon, actually, this Porsche, which has been in storage with us for the last few months, is going back to its owner. That has also just been detailed. So looking absolutely mint, ready for the good weather. So we're going to have loads of space very temporarily until I think next week, when we'll have a new arrival, and I'll show you what that is next week. However, we have in the meantime had another new arrival, which is this MG. So the eagle-eyed viewers might remember this car was here very shortly after we started working in this facility, and it came in for the usual mechanical inspection and also an estimate for a full interior rework. Now at the time we did the essential jobs off the mechanical inspection, the ones that were kind of necessary for it to be safe to use, and then the customer booked it back in to have the rest of the mechanical work and the interior done. In the meantime, it went and did a track day at Goodwood, and then it went into a body shop nearer to the owner to have some metalwork repairs. I think there were repairs to the doors, a replacement bonnet, and some repairs to the wings, and a front end respray. And now it's come here for us to make an awesome job out of the interior. So we'll see very shortly what Richard's up to there, but the gist is everything. Door cards, kick panels with speakers in, rear panel work around here with speakers incorporated as well. We're doing a Mazda MX-5 seat conversion, which then in turn will be leathered to match everything else. Door cards, custom centre console, dash top. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty spectacular thing. And actually I have to say, the interior is really the only thing that lets this car down massively now, so it's going to be really cool to see it all come together. And we're also going to be dropping the engine and gearbox out to do a Tremec 5-speed gearbox conversion on it, as well as a few other mechanical things. So yeah, be cool to see that one develop. The Mustang, I also imagine, won't be here for too much longer now, with the weather getting good. It's just about ready to go back to the owner. This week last week actually, we took it to Northampton Motorsport to do a carb setup. When this was built by Retro Power, the engine was supplied to us as an already completed unit, basically ready to put in. Now, as you'll know, we had to tackle a few leaks on this, which is why it was down here. But also, one thing that we've never thought was quite right was the carb setup on it. So we went to Northampton for Troy to do a carb setup on it, which is done. Also, just go through on the rollers, checking the ignition timing and getting that perfected. And those tweaks have really transformed it. It feels considerably more powerful now. Most of our concerns were actually not the power, but the light throttle refinement. Sometimes when you were just rolling up to a junction or a roundabout and you could sort of see that it was okay to go, you put a bit of light throttle on from low revs and it'd kind of stumble a little bit before it picked up. And that's all cleaned up completely now. So yeah, absolutely awesome thing, ready to use in the summer. So that's that. We shall walk past my poor E30 Touring, which is as neglected as ever, but hopefully this year I might actually get around to getting this small amount of work that needs done and get it on the road. Right, so this hint of black leather here was probably a suggestion of what might be going on here on the MG, but I shall hand over to Richard to tell you what he's been up to.
How's it, everybody? Good to see you again. I'm out of Area 51 finally, so you'll see a little bit more of me until I get dragged back there. What are we talking about? Churchill. So you guys saw Jamie's got some nice footage of the door cards, well, the rear quarter cards rather. This is the opposite side. I think you can see me where I take the template or the pattern from this side that just checked at all the holes. I've got to give it to the metal shop boys, seeing that we chopped the rear doors completely out of that car. It's not uncommon when to never assume that on a classic car the left and the right hand side is identical, because they never are. It's just the way it is. But I've got to say, Nat and his boys there in fabrication, when I transferred my template from the left hand side of the car to the right hand side, every single hole lined up perfectly. So less work for me. So thank you guys if you're watching, and yes, we can brag about that. Anyway, so we chuffed about that. It was it's never been done, so we designed this amazing look, designed this amazing three-dimensional bit, and then it's my job to cover it. So I've requested some grooves for the seams and stuff. So and it's either a double needle or single needle, or it's a double fold or just a single fold. And that came out really nicely. So as you can see on the video, it's so flat and so nice. And the reason why we put the groove in is you'll know that I've got a skiving machine as well, and that's, you can use that to get rid of the excess. But the problem when you just simply skive seams, the seam, especially when you're putting top stitch up, the leather can become flimsy. So by leaving the leather in its normal 1 to 1.5, 1.6, depending on the type of leather that we're using, state, not skiving it, there's a lot more structure, so that seam just looks so much better. And because we're manufacturing these components from scratch, we can put a groove in and the seam goes and lies on top there and it sits flat. So basically what we're doing, my machine that I'm running is set up to sew with the smallest I can sew with is an 8mm width seam. So what we do is we don't want to put these massive grooves in, so we make them a little bit smaller in the substrate. And then what I do is I hand cut them down. The only little thing that we had to change on this, which excites me really, that it's only that, was to increase the groove with 1mm, because when I sit and cut it, I have to go so close to the stitches, and you only got one chance. If you nick that stitch, that's it. Because you've been trimming it, it's a reject. You start over. So by just simply, Luke assured me it's not a big job on the CAD, so thank you, Luke. And increasing it by a millimeter, it means I can just cut it a little bit more easier. What's the word to say there, Jamie?
Effectively?
More effectively, without worrying to go so close to the thread and nick them and then buggering it up. Yeah, so that's the only little change that we're going to make. The rest of it all worked out 100% perfect as we imagined it. So now it's on to the right hand side, and then we're going to now transfer, because now what we've learned and what we know about the rear quarter cards, which is relatively small, we'll move on to the front cards. And you know, just position them, make them right, and Luke will do his final designs. Then I'll trim those, and they are going to look absolutely mint. So that's Churchill. We're carrying on with that. Very cool. We're in the den, so you saw the. I've got a Fiat Dino to trim. Very nice bit of Italian there. So hopefully we can do it justice by making it even cooler than what it is. So no easy task, but hey, we're going to try. But currently I'm on the MGB, the little red one that Carl showed you. So there's various things that's going to go on there. I won't repeat all of that. I am busy with the seats. We're trying to keep it in keeping, so we're going to go with vertical flutes, just a little bit, because we're using a more modern seat. It's not uncommon to put Mazda MX-5 seats into these MGs, because the adapter frame, can I call it, that then allows you to bolt the MG MX-5 seats into the MG is freely available. So that just makes sense. There's no fabrication works that's needed. So I'm kind of copying that like vertical fluted design, making it a little bit chunkier, because this is a bit of a chunkier seat. Customer decided we're keeping it all black, so nothing, you know, outrageous with colored stitching or anything. So it's going to be a nice, tight fitting, smooth and slick black seat that's just a little bit more comfortable than the old one. Only thing I'm doing is I'm adding some map pockets, because the only add on the seat. So just a bit of map pocket. It's always just handy. Just breaks up this big panel as well once that's nice and tight. Kept it classic. Just a bit of elastic. And then top stitch on there, so breaks the panel and it comes in handy. So win over there. That's the seats. These seats, it's a, don't know if you can remember, so it's like a scratch trim, reverse engineering. That's the clever word. So all I do is I strip the current seat covers, the OE seat covers down, and I simply copy them. The only thing where there's a bit of patterning was the middle, the inserts, because I redesigned the flutes, and I have to do this now just to make sure that they line up and everything. And that is that from me. Nothing more to add. Jamie will get some nice progress on that, and hopefully by next week you'll see some seats done at least, and then we'll crack on with the rest of the jobs, cards, center console, dashboards and all that. But until next week, have a good time.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I will just say before I go, we have a good stock of t-shirts. I'm being really optimistic and thinking the weather's going to get good soon. We're about out of stock on most of the hoodies, which we'll restock soon. But in the meantime, if you want to get yourself a t-shirt, get into the web shop, retropower.co.uk/shop, and shop till you drop. And in the meantime, I will see you again next week.